الدنيا بمصابيح وجعلناها رجوما للشياطين وأعتدنا لهم عذاب السعير وللذين كفروا بربهم عذاب جهنم وبئس المصير إذا ألقوا فيها سمعوا لها شهيقا وهي تفور تكاد تميز من الغيظ كلما ألقي فيها فوج سألهم خزنتها ألم يأتكم نذير قالوا بلى قد جاءنا نذير فكذبنا وقلنا ما نزل الله من شيء إن أنتم إلا في ضلال كبير وقالوا لو كنا نسمع أو نعقل ما كنا في أصحاب السعير فاعترفوا بذنبهم فسحقا لأصحاب السعير إن الذين يخشون ربهم بالغيب لهم مغفرة وأجر كبير وأسروا قولكم أو جهروا به إنه عليم بذات الصدور ألا يعلم من خلق وهو اللطيف الخبير هو الذي جعل لكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا في مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور أأمنتم من في السماء أن يخسف بكم الأرض فإذا هي تمور أم أمنتم من في السماء أن يرسل عليكم حاصبا فستعلمون كيف نذير ولقد كذب الذين من قبلهم فكيف كان نكير أولم يروا إلى الطير فوقهم صافات ويقبضن ما يمسكهن إلا الرحمن إنه بكل شيء بصير أمن هذا الذي هو جند لكم ينصركم من دون الرحمن إن الكافرون إلا في غرور أمن هذا الذي يرزقكم إن أمسك رزقه بل لجوا في عتو ونفور أفمن يمشي مكبا على وجهه أهدى أمن يمشي سويا على صراط مستقيم قل هو الذي أنشاكم وجعل لكم السمع والأبصار والأفئدة قليلا ما تشكرون قل هو الذي ذرأكم في الأرض وإليه تحشرون ويقولون متى هذا الوعد إن كنتم صادقين قل إنما العلم عند الله وإنما أنا نذير مبين فلما رأوه زلفة سيئت وجوه الذين كفروا وقيل هذا الذي كنتم به تدعون قل أرأيتم إن أهلكني الله ومن معي أو رحمنا فمن يجير الكافرين من عذاب أليم قل هو الرحمن آمنا به وعليه توكلنا فستعلمون من هو في ضلال مبين قل أرأيتم إن أصبح ماؤكم غورا فمن يأتيكم بماء معين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. أفلح من صلى على محمد وآل محمد. الفاتح يرحمكم الله.
Assalamu alaikum. Yesterday I was asked to read today, but today inshallah Faris will read. I'll give just another glimpse that is very important that I would like to share with people, especially with the youth. It's very important to connect what happened to Imam Hussein with the history of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's super interconnected. So I highly suggest people to, there's a book, actually there's two books, one in Arabic, if you can read Arabic, or a book in English from Madlon. It has an explanation of details, what happened after the Prophet. And you can actually connect every single detail, what happened after the Prophet death, and just before the Prophet death, and then what happened with Imam Ali, with Imam Hassan, and the accumulation with Imam Hussein. So I just wanted to share that with you, and go with brother.
نتوجه إلى الزيارة. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أزور سيدي ومولاي أبا عبد الله أصالة عن نفسي ونيابة عن والدي ووالد والدي وكل من سألني الدعاء والزيارة. السلام عليك يا وارث آدم صفوة الله. السلام عليك يا وارث نوح نبي الله. السلام عليك يا وارث إبراهيم خليل الله. السلام عليك يا وارث موسى كليم الله. السلام عليك يا وارث عيسى روح الله. السلام عليك يا وارث محمد حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا وارث أمير المؤمنين ولي الله. السلام عليك يا ابن محمد المصطفى. السلام عليك يا ابن علي المرتضى. السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا ابن خديجة الكبرى. السلام عليك يا ثار الله وابن ثاره والوتر الموتور. أشهد أنك قد أقمت الصلاة وآتيت الزكاة وأمرت بالمعروف ونهيت عن المنكر وأطعت الله ورسوله حتى أتاك اليقين. فلعن الله أمة قتلتك ولعن الله أمة ظلمتك، ولعن الله أمة سمعت بذلك فرضيت به. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، أشهد أنك كنت نورا في الأصلاب الشامخة والأرحام المطهرة، لم تنجسك الجاهلية بأنجاسها، ولم تلبسك من ملهمات ثيابها. وأشهد أنك من دعائم الدين وأركان المؤمنين، وأشهد أنك الإمام البر التقي الرضي الزكي الهادي المهدي. وأشهد أن الأمة من ولدك كلمة التقوى وأعلام الهدى والعروة الوثقى والحجة على أهل الدنيا. وأشهد الله وملائكته وأنبياءه ورسله أني بكم مؤمن وبإيابكم موقن، بشرائع الدين وخواتم عملي، وقلبي لقلبكم سلم، وأمري لأمركم متبع. صلوات الله عليكم وعلى أرواحكم وعلى أجسادكم وعلى أجسامكم وعلى شاهدكم وعلى غائبكم وعلى ظاهركم وعلى باطنكم، بأبي أنت وأمي يا ابن رسول الله، بأبي أنت وأمي يا أبا عبد الله. لقد عظمت الرزية وجلت المصيبة بك علينا وعلى جميع أهل السماوات والأرض، فلعن الله أمة أسرجت وألجمت وتهيأت وتنقبت لقتالك. يا مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، قصدت زيارتك، أسأل الله بالشأن الذي لك عنده وبالمحل الذي لك لديه أن يصلي على محمد وآل محمد، ويجعلني معكم في الدنيا والآخرة. ثواب سورة الفاتحة قبلها الصلوات. اللهم صل على محمد.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Dear brothers, dear sisters, respected elders, our wonderful guests, the Sheikh and the Sayyid, ahlan wa sahlan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. On behalf of Second Gen, it gives me great honor to welcome you for our third and final night with Sheikh Ahmed Haneef. I do have a few small reminders before I do get started. Please, number one, feel free to help yourself to the refreshments at any time, but please avoid being wasteful as best as you possibly can. Thank you so much. Secondly, this group is run completely by volunteers, and one of our wonderful, wonderful youth decided to step up. I may have pressured her a little bit, so if I do end up becoming greedy and good friends with you, I will pressure you nonstop until I have you join us, inshallah. So this wonderful sister has agreed to give voice to something you may not have thought about before. The sister decided to write poetry from the voice of Hadid, the iron that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought down to mankind. And she has related this to how it must have felt for the Hadid when it was chained to Sayyidah Zainab and the Sabaya when they left for the Arba'een. So it gives me great honor to welcome Sister Ulfa with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much, Sir Afrah, for the little introduction. So, just like Sir Afrah explained, Bismillah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأنزلنا الحديد فيه بأس شديد ومنافع للناس وليعلم الله من ينصره ورسوله بالغيب إن الله قوي عزيز. And we send down iron with his great might, benefits for humanity and means for Allah to prove who is willing to stand up for him and his messengers without seeing him. Surely Allah is all-powerful, almighty. I was sent down by the powerful as a gift to insan from the merciful. My name is mentioned in the glorious book. O insan, slow down and take a look. But as said by Ar-Rahman, I can be a test for insan. You can find me in workshops. You can find me in your dead corpse. But don't judge me quickly. Let me tell you what happened lately. I saw something that reminded me of a story. Not a simple story, but an event of glory. Whoever uses me to serve the messengers of God, blessings and honor is what he will see in his road. But to the one that uses me against my master, surely difficulties and curses will be his shelter. 100 years ago, I witnessed a tragedy due to a group of insan that caused agony, not only to me, but to the Prophet's family. I witnessed this tragedy silently. My place is in the hands of messengers, but around their hands I feel like a stranger. What can I do, O Hussein, my master, when insan becomes blind due to the deceiver? Oh, Lady Zainab, when they force me around your wrist, I ask myself, why do I exist? The Almighty created me to serve you, but on that day I felt that I deceived you. Every atom of mine shouted and cried, but on that day some insan, to be deaf, decided. Against my will, they used me for the biggest crime. I couldn't raise my head as I was filled with shame. I saw the atrocities where the Prophet's daughters were walking from cities to cities. I was so in pain to see the marks that I left on them. Surely it is a tragedy for the Prophet's family, but do not forget it is also an event of glory. The sacrifice will not go in vain, because until this very day, inside of me echoes Ya Hussein. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah.
To hasten the reappearance of our Imam al-Thalitha bi'ala aswatikum. Ahsanti, sister, and thank you to all the volunteers. If I can just take a few seconds to acknowledge all the volunteers who made this happen. Of course, first of all, to Masjid Ahlillbait for opening their doors and welcoming us, and always saying ahlan wa sahlan. So thank you very much on behalf of Second Gen. To our wonderful volunteers from Second Gen as well, and to all of you for continuing to bless us with your presence. Of course, this program is entirely run by donations. So if you would like to participate, we'll be able to facilitate tax receipts for those that do need them. But also, you can get in touch with us to do so, or you can go towards the donation box at the back at any time. And Jazakumullah alf khair. The lecture today will be a bit shorter so that we can leave space for Q&A at the end. And inshallah, we'll aim to finish early because I know everyone has work and school tomorrow. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Sheikh Ahmed Haneef with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
sure this is okay? No, it's okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله وحبيبه أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته جميعا. Today I'm going to try to kind of swip it. I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit. I want to talk about a spiritual matter and leave the business about activism and so forth to the question and answer, because I think it's a bit more sort of political and social and so forth. Now we are commemorating the Arba'een of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And I would like to explore with you the concept of 40 in Islamic spirituality. Now we have heard the hadith by Imam Hassan al-Askari, where he says, when he describes the signs of Iman, or the signs of a mu'min, and when they say mu'min in many of the hadith, what they are talking about is the perfect or the archetypal follower of the Ahlillbait, alayhim salam. That's what they're talking about. And he says the signs of Iman are 5. One is wearing a ring on the right hand. The other is praying 51 rak'ah, meaning the total combination of the obligatory and the mustahab prayers daily. The other one is saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim in a loud voice. I'm just saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim in a loud voice. And what he means is that for the first 2 rak'ah of any 3 or 4 rak'ah, the first 2 rak'ah, you say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is one of our identifying signs. And placing the forehead on the earth while prostrating, and making the ziyarat to Karbala on Arba'een, the 40th day after the passing away of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Now, what does 40 mean? What is the significance of 40? You find the number 40 reappearing in ahadith many times. You find it also in the Holy Quran. There's a hadith by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says, "Man akhlasa Allahi arba'ina sabahan dhaharat biyanabi'ul hikmati min qalbihi ala lisanih." He says, whoever makes himself sincere for Allah for 40 days, the fountains of wisdom will emerge from his heart unto his tongue. Whoever makes himself sincere for Allah For 40 days, the fountains of wisdom will emerge from his heart unto his tongue. When they say 40 days, they mean 40 successive days. And it means that you approach a practice in sincerity. Many times you find some of these hadith tend to be general, meaning that you can do practically anything in a sincere manner for Allah. For example, you can say, I'm gonna, do Salatul Layl for 40 nights. So I'll give to the poor for 40 days. Or you could look at one of your faults and say, I'm going to struggle against that fault for 40 days. And what happens after that 40 days? In this case, it says you will find wisdom flowing across your tongue from your heart. There are some hadith that says a person will find wisdom flowing from their tongue from a place they do not know. So when you're speaking, you might be giving a speech, you might be talking to somebody, and you would find yourself saying something so wise you shock yourself. You don't know where this came from. You never read it somewhere. Or if you had read it somewhere, you forgot all about it, but it makes sense. It is something that is very profound. So here we have the idea of 40 as being a unit of spiritual achievement that is represented or realized in terms of one's knowledge, in terms of one's awareness. And indeed, what we mean by spirituality, what we mean by being aware of the hidden realm and so on, according to Allama Tabatabai, he says this is a form of knowledge. This is an ability to see a deeper reality into things. You have a hadith Qudsi where it says that Allah says, I kneaded the clay of Adam with my 2 hands for 40 days. Okay, I kneaded the clay of Adam with my 2 hands for 40 days. Okay, what does it mean by the 2 hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And it's an application to Hazrat Adam. Well, of course, now we know that 2 hands, Allah doesn't have hands like us. Allah doesn't have hands. Okay, hands symbolize power. Hands symbolize power. For example, you have a hadith of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu, but it's very well known among Shias and Sunnis, where the Holy Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says that when you are confronted with an injustice, change it with your hands. It means change it with your power to change that thing. Change it with your hands. And if you can't change it with your hands, speak out about it with your tongue. And if you cannot change it with your tongue, you should be hating that thing in your heart. And that hate of that thing in your heart is the least of Iman. It means that when you can change with your hands, it is the strongest expression of that Iman. Changing it with your hand is actually changing that thing in power. Now, just a little bit, when we are talking about this ability of changing with your hand and the process by which we get to that, the reverse is the case. First, you must hate that thing in your heart. And that thing you hate in your heart, you should be able to talk about it with your tongue. Talking about it with your tongue means that you see an oppressive thing, you see something bad, you look at it, you say this is bad, and you analyze it. This is the tongue, the inner tongue. You analyze it, you examine it, you criticize it. You try to see why is that thing bad? How does that thing affect you? What we can do about it? This is that internal intellectual process that you go through to be able to understand that thing. And then after understanding that thing, you present it to people. You are mobilizing people to be able to change that particular situation. That tongue that he's talking about is not just the physical tongue, just like the hands is not just the physical hand. The tongue is whatever mode of communication that might be effective to be able to impart the awareness of the knowledge of that awful thing so that people would know that that thing is awful. And so that they too will hate it in their heart. And they too will go through that process of understanding it. And that when you reach a point where you could, and so you could mean writing a play, writing a poem, writing an article, giving a speech. It is an act of creativity in order to bring that message over to people. And then when you arrive at a critical mass, when we're talking about, let's say, a situation that you need, let's say, for example, social change. And then when you reach a critical mass, when you have enough people who can understand this and are ready to move, ready to mobilize, then you change it with your hands. Changing it with your hands could mean, for example, not just holding somebody's hand and restraining them from something. It could mean things like political power, like Hamtramck, as I mentioned to you guys before. It can mean things like political power. It could mean things like, for example, writing articles. It could mean, lobbying a government or something to be able to get that thing changed. This is what it means. So it's a process of action, a process of change that we are able to enact by this particular process. One of the problems of contemporary society is that a lot of the new generation don't read enough. They rely upon YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and all these type of things. I'm not saying you shouldn't deal with these things, but especially deal with them in terms of you expressing yourself on it. You don't just rely upon it, because without reading, brothers and sisters, without writing, you are actually making a certain part of your intellect and your ability to come to express yourself. It truncates it. It cuts it off, because the kind of mental process that you use to learn from these things, and I'm not saying you shouldn't learn from them, but you should read first, because the people who are talking to you and making a little video about this type of stuff, they already read that stuff. You got to read that too. Because when you read, Allah says to us, Iqra, right? When you read, a different type of power comes to your mind. You see, what you are looking at on the paper literally are basically symbols. Okay? Symbols. And what happens in your mind is that abstraction, you take it into your mind and you make it concrete. I remember in the beginning of the Harry Potter movies, there was a lot of young people who was like, I don't want to see the movie. Guys who read the book, kids who read the book, said, I don't want to see the movie. Or if they saw the movie, they were dissatisfied with the movie. Why? Because the book had more in it. I'm not advocating Harry Potter, all right? The book had more in it that stimulated your imagination. It took you into greater depth. You see? And you had greater satisfaction that even a movie with all the glitter and all the productions and all this, the CGI and so forth could not replace the depth of how you understood that story that you got from reading. It's the same thing we need to do to be able to analyze our society. One of the things that, for example, in this society, maybe they might misquote me again, which you always love to do. There was and I think I'm getting into the topic of activism. There was somebody complained to I believe a radio station, right? Why do you always write something negative about the Muslims? And when somebody writes something, why do you write negative things about the Muslims and you write positive things about Zionism? And the response was this: when somebody writes something negative about Zionism, hundreds of people from the Jewish community start writing and complaining and criticizing and so forth. So many, and it messes up their production program. It messes up their publication. They have to answer to this. They have to, it makes things difficult to write and so forth, and they can't be bothered with that. He says, but when somebody writes something about the negative about the Muslims, nobody complains. Nobody writes in. And one of the things that I think all of our community should have is a media watch program. You cover the Globe and Mail, you cover the Sun, you cover the Star, you cover, channel whatever, and so forth and so on, and then you get together and you report to each other, well, look, in the Global Mail, it says something critical about Islam, and then you start your barrage. That means you got to read. That means you have to be able to analyze. You have to be able to express yourself. You cannot express yourself if you don't know, if you're not familiar with reading. Because reading engages your ability to write. Just like speaking to your kids, give them the ability to speak. And so this is what it means by the tongue. The tongue is a very powerful thing. It is the most powerful tool that the oppressed has. The oppressed might not have at that moment the ability to change things, but they will have the ability to initiate and to spark people into changing things. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that he kneaded the clay of Adam with his two hands, this two hands means the power of Allah. And the right hand usually is symbolized to be the hand of spirituality, the divine hand, the hand of truth and justice and so forth. The left hand has many meanings. The left hand has the meaning of, it could be the hand of evil. You have, for example, occult types of beliefs, they call it left-hand path. The left hand could also mean the hand of the material world. So here we have Adam being composed of something transcendent, which is a divinely infused power. And he has another aspect of himself where he is material, where he is a body. And he has that particular type of aspect to him. You find that the right hand also is mentioned when we talking about creation. They say Allah created the angels with the right hand, with his right hand, not with the left. What it indicates is a limitation on the angels themselves. You see, the angels don't have bodies and so forth, and because of this, they only have intellect. They have intellect. They might have a lot of power, but they only have intellect. They don't have bodies. Because with bodies, as we mentioned before, your body leads to the development of shahwa. Your body has appetites. And our struggle is to struggle with our appetites or with our desires, not to eliminate them, because our desires and our appetites are very important for our survival, as we have mentioned before. But to not be dominated by our appetites. Not be dominated by our shahwa. So the angels don't have that problem. And so therefore the angels tend to be a little more naqis, a little more incomplete in a certain sense. Why do I say this? Because a human being is the Khalifatullah fil ard. What does it mean by the Khalifatullah fil ard? What is it? What is the Khalifa on the earth? What does that person need to have? Human beings, huh? Okay. Well, human beings are the epitome, the highest form of Allah's creation, and therefore they possess in themselves a reflection of the totality of the divine names of Allah as manifested in creation. They possess that. Our goal is to try to balance these out, to have them manifest themselves in a balanced way, in a way that leads to our perfection. So there was a analysis of Fir'aun. According to one of the great Urafa, they said Fir'aun represented more of the name Al-Jabbar and less of the name Ar-Rahman. And when he came to this, when he was born in this earth, the Jabr of Fir'aun dominated his Rahm, dominated his ability to mercy, and this is why he became a very bad person. In other words, we in ourselves, we have these divine names in ourselves, but for many of us, they are not balanced. We have one greater than the other one underdeveloped, and so forth and so on. And so, as a microcosm, as a small representation of the totality of the cosmos, the totality of reality, the human being has all of them in themselves. Whereas the angels only have the exalted realm and not that negative realm. And it's also said, with the left hand, Allah created the shayateen. And the shayateen are characterized, they have intellect, but the intellect is subordinate to their shahwa, to their egos and so forth. And this is what makes them shayateen. Here Allah has created Adam with two hands that symbolize the totality of creation that is there in that particular person. That's why he says he created Allah. He needed the clay of Allah with his two hands. For what? 40 days. Why 40 days? What happens after that 40 days? Then Adam is perfect. Adam is complete. So 40 days represents completion and achievement from that spiritual point of view. Another aspect of the two, and we talked about pairs and so forth, when we talk about the Dajjal having one eye, a lot of people imagine that the Dajjal was going to be walking around with an eye in the middle of his forehead, or one eye open and one eye sort of covered over with skin or something like that. And you wonder, who's going to follow a guy like that? Right? No, when the Dajjal shows up, he shows up like a good-looking young man, right? Shows up like a good-looking guy. What it means from the point of view of the Urafa is that the Dajjal does not have spiritual insight. He has a material insight. And when we say material, we don't just mean he's a materialist and think that the material things are the only reality. No. It means a material insight on all levels of materiality. Which embodies the occult, which embodies sorcery. Sorcery is an aspect of the material mentality, the material world. This is why they say, the Dajjal could kill some youth in front of people and then bring him back to life. What is he using? He's not using miracles, which come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's using sorcery. So two hands mean maximum power. Then we have in the Holy Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ وَعَدْنَا مُوسَى أَرْبَعِينَ لَيْلَةً. And remember when we appointed with Musa 40 nights. That 40 nights again, at the completion of that 40 nights, what does Allah do? Allah sends the message upon him. Here again we have 40. And we have, for example, a hadith that talk about the human intellect reaching its maturity at 40. So 40 means completion. So when you find, for example, some of the, the great Urafa, there's a book called Ruh al-Mujarrad. I can't remember the English translation. If anybody can help me with that, please do so, right? It's been published by the Islamic College, I believe. Pardon me? The Liberated Soul, okay? Where it talks about the followers of the last, or one of the last great Urafa in the Shia tradition, Allama Qadi Tabatabai and his disciples, okay, his followers. And it is said in that book that when they have to solve a problem, when they want to tackle an issue that is very intractable, what they would say is, okay, let's get back together in 40 days. And they go off in 40 days and they do something sincere. They might go into khalwa, which is a very, very, very powerful way of spiritual development, where they go and they isolate themselves from society for a while. You're very careful. You don't eat hot food, for example. You eat lukewarm food. You don't leave the room unless for the call of nature and so forth and so on. And you spend that 40 days in contemplation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And after that, they get the solution to that particular problem. And then they come back to each other. We have great philosophers like Mullah Sadra who do this type of thing. And so this 40 days is actually a program, a way of arriving at a means whereby you can deal with problems. We have, for example, the change in the world after the flood of Hazrat Noah. The earth was covered with injustice and oppression. What does Allah do? He makes it rain from the sky and bubble from the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. To do what? To have an important change in the world itself, a cleansing of the world, and in a certain sense, a kind of a recreation of the human being, a reappearance of the human being in a higher particular sense. So 40 is a very, very important level of completion. And not only for doing something outwardly, also to measure the end of the negative influence of something. So, for example, you have sources that say that when a person backbites a Muslim man or woman, Allah will not accept their prayer for 40 days. Right? And when you say not accept their prayer, it doesn't mean they say, okay, because Allah doesn't accept my prayer, I'm not going to pray. That's a sin upon a sin. Right? So you have to do this prayer, which is basically negative. When I say negative, I don't mean negative as a value. Negative in the sense that it keeps you from getting worse, but it doesn't add anything positive. Or if, for example, you eat, let's say, tainted meat. Let's say a camel ate something that was najis, and you ate the meat of this camel. The effect of that, and he did this deliberately, for example, the effect of that is that for 40 days, your spirituality is going to be affected. If drinking alcohol, it's the same thing. So 40 days is a kind of cleansing, just like, for example, the rain fell and the ground bubbled up with water and so forth, which led to a cleansing of the earth. Similarly, 40 is a kind of, the period of 40 is a kind of cleansing of the person. It said that, for example, in some hadith, Hazrat Adam wept for 40 days in paradise. 40 days after he left paradise. That is a kind of a cleansing in itself of Hazrat Adam, to that, so he could adjust himself to his new situation in the world. So 40 is a very important transition point for one moving from one stage to another. Sometimes you might do something with sincerity, with a desire to get closer to Allah, through maybe, let's say, eliminating a habit or something like that. And that 40 days, after that 40 days, you don't see anything happening. You do another 40 days. Remember, no gap. You can't say, I'm going to do 3 now, take a break for 5 days, and then go back and do another 3, makes it 6. No, you can't do that. It is something, it's a rigorous program that makes you sincere. So for example, you might have a problem where let's say you're involved with a debate about some issue in society, and it was problematic for you. But despite all you read and research about it, you want help from Allah to be able to handle this issue. You do something like this to find the wisdom that flows over your tongue. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. One very important hadith in the area of 40, and it gives you an idea as to how a hadith tends to have some very deep meanings that we don't sometimes have access to unless we are taught by the great awliya and so forth. It's a beautiful hadith by the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, one's neighbors are defined by 40 houses on each side, from the front, from the back, from the right, and from the left. Your neighbor is 40 houses from the front, the back, the right, and the left, in all 4 directions. Now, given on the Zahir level, given the importance of being just and helpful and indulgent to your neighbor is something that is encouraged in Islam. Not just simply being just and helpful to your Muslim neighbor. It didn't say that. It said your neighbor. So here we are living in Kufristan, okay? And in the 40 houses on every side of us is who? Kuffar. Right? You got to be just to them. You got to go check them out. You got to look them up. Hey, John, I haven't seen you for a week. Are you okay? Where is John? I haven't seen him for a week. Let me go and check him out at his house. You see? What does this do to your neighbor? That neighbor who thinks that Muslims are this and that and oppression and they're intolerant and so forth. Love changes people. Care for people changes people. So this is a superficial level, and it's deep. When I moved into my new neighborhood in London, it was close to Christmas time. I had nothing to do with it. It's wives again. My wife decided, you know what? For Christmas, we're going to distribute chocolates to everybody in the neighborhood. We're new in the neighborhood. So they made these nice little bags, with a little bow on it and stuff like that. And her and the girls went around and, distributed stuff. Had Merry Christmas. Everybody has some Hindus there. So they went there, Merry Christmas, and they gave them chocolates. Nice to see you. So because we are Muslims, we're not going to be arguing about whether Christmas, the 25th of December is a pagan holiday, whatever, right? You see, that's their culture. They chose a day to commemorate the birthday of a prophet that we accept. Brothers and sisters, let me tell you, 2 days after I'm going to work, everybody, hi, how you doing? We're all friends. Everybody's friends with you. just by showing that type of love and attention to people. That's a superficial level. One understanding of these 40 houses in every direction are your 4 faculties of the soul. There are 4 faculties of the soul. 4 things that the soul expresses, 4 powers that the soul have. It has the quwwatul aqliya, the intellectual faculty. The soul has that particular faculty. The quwwatul shahwiya, the faculty of desire, or they call it in Greek philosophy, the concupiscent faculty, the faculty of desire. There's the quwwatul wahmiya, the imaginative faculty, and the quwwatul ghadabiyya, the faculty of anger, but what we would call in Greek philosophy, we would call it the irascible faculty. And I tell you why they would call it irascible and concupiscent instead of anger and desire. Why? Because these faculties of the soul are not negative. They're just the qualities of the soul. Now, let's look at each one of them. The highest one is the intellectual faculty. That means the ability to know the difference between right and wrong without anybody telling you. Okay? Without you reading Quran. I'm not saying you must read Quran. Huh? I'm saying without even reading Quran. All of us as human beings in ourselves know what is right and wrong. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, the intellect is ma'soom. The intellect has no sin. So when we say that, we're not talking about, let's say, the intellectual, this guy who went to university and stuff like that. That's a different thing. And to increase that intellect, it means that you have to control the next one. Okay? The quwwat shahwiya. What does shahwa mean? We tend to use shahwa in a negative sense, just like we tend to use the word nafs in a negative sense. Using to his nafs, it means person into the ego. Okay? Nafs is more than that. Shahwa just simply means desire for those things that your body requires for its existence. That's what it is. And then you have the faculty, the irascible faculty, the faculty of anger. Anger does not mean being upset and so forth. I think I talked about this to you guys before, didn't I? Didn't I? Okay, so thank you very much. So I won't continue, all right, with that. Okay, and the quwwatul wahmiya, and we talked about that as well, all right? And 40 levels of this, of each one of these, you have to cover in order to arrive at a particular perfection of the soul. So I just want to encourage you to keep this in mind. You want to arrive at a higher level, this is what you do. This is what you do. You make a target of what you want to achieve in fulfilling yourself. What are you lacking? Are you lacking in self-discipline? Are you lacking in not working hard enough to come to Allah? Are you lacking in the fact that, for example, you always are desirous of doing Salatul Layl, but you're just too lazy to get up in the morning? Get up with some sincerity. I'm going to do this for Allah, for you, for 40 days. And I would hope that you would give me the power to be able to make this malaka, meaning make this second nature to me. Make this a new person with a new investment of that new capability in myself in order to get closer to you. This is what we want to get to. Remember the difference between mukhlis and mukhlas? A mukhlis is a person who actually strives to be sincere. They are not sincere in a second nature type of thing. Huh? They're striving to be sincere. A mukhlas is somebody who is made sincere. It becomes part of your nature. You exhibit sincerity in a natural sense. And we find that type of thing happening in our society as well, in normal life. For example, when people are taking, let's say, martial arts, for example, or boxing and so forth, one of the first things that you learn to do is how to strike. You end up practicing striking all the time. You saw Karate Kid, the first Karate Kid? Everybody like, I'm an old dude. The first Karate Kid, the Karate Kid, goes to Mr. Miyagi to get training. And Miyagi got him, cleaning his car or polishing the car with his right hand, and then he comes and says, "Okay, now polish the car with your left hand." And the kid starts thinking, "What's this? I want to learn karate. You telling me about polishing your car?" Okay, and then Miyagi say, "Okay, react to this punch." And he moves like this, and he moves like that. The same type of strokes that he was doing on the car, he was practicing this till it became malaka. It became his second nature. Anything you want to do to develop yourself, you have to keep practicing it and practicing it and practicing it till you can do it without even thinking. And this is what makes a good fighter. A good fighter is not somebody who thinks about throwing a punch. A good fighter throws the right punch anytime without even thinking about it. A good debater, for example, knows how to respond to a particular question just like that without even thinking about it. A good writer, for example, is somebody who could access their imagination just like that, just to put something on paper. Okay, this is where we want to get to. We want to get to a point where we are mukhlas. And to do that requires practice. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. And so, when we are talking about the 40th day after the death and burial of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, when we are talking about commemorating the 40th day of any one of our mu'mineen who have passed away, what we are saying is that at that point they have arrived at the level of transcendence. They have completely been detached from the physical world and are now in a higher state of existence. They are now firmly in the akhirah, firmly on that level, and they have arrived at a perfection that begins with them leaving this world. And then when they have arrived there, what we are doing is adding to that perfection by us remembering them, by us praying for them, by us giving charity on their behalf, etc., that has them, that contributes to the height at which they are. We in Islam have the power and know how to relate to our departed souls. Christians don't have this. Okay? They have lost this. The Roman Catholics have it, but they're losing it. So when somebody's, some of your friend, your non-Muslim friends pass away and they had grief and stuff like that, you can tell them, look, your parents or whoever you loved and who had died is still around. Is still existing. You do something for them. What we would do for our departed souls is to give in charity, to send a gift of 2 rakah, for them, to make Hajj on their behalf, to do Umrah on their behalf. All these things go to them. And, what happens with that soul is that they become very attached to you, and you could see them, you could feel their presence. I remember one Muslim convert brother, his father passed away, he was very distraught. I told him, I said, this is what you do. After a while he came back to me, he says, I can feel my dad. And I know he was in this room with me. When my father passed away, after I went to his funeral in Trinidad, I went to meet my mother, because my mother was in Canada, on my way back to home. He wasn't a Muslim, but we are, like the Holy Prophet is the mercy for all the worlds, we are a mercy for our families too. You know, we are a benefit for them. You know, so, you know, for example, and among Salafis, you say, you know, yeah, your parent or your brother was a kafir and you can't do anything for them, and that type of a inhuman kind of a way of thinking. Not like this. When my wife's husband, my wife's husband is me. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Giving speeches, sometimes it does that to you. When my wife's mother passed away, right? She was in Jamaat al-Zahra in Iran. The teachers and all the students had a Quran reading for her, right? They read the entire Quran for her. You know, this is us, Shia, and we are like this. We are a mercy to our families. So anyway, so I started reading Quran for my dad. But my mom is a psychic, right? My mom has a very, I couldn't do a lot of naughty things when I was a kid, man. You know, I do a naughty thing, my mom is going to call me from work. What are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just coming from school. No, you're not. You know, you're out in the back of the building smoking with some guys or something. Ooh, you know what I mean? She's like that. Anyway, so I drop in on her and I'm hanging out with her. I'm in the living room. She has a small house, you know, the living room is pretty small. So I'm staying in the living room and I'm reading Quran for my dad. Okay. And then they had to do some work on the washroom in the house, and the dust from the work in the washroom was getting into her room. I says, okay, Mom, come sleep in the living room. I'll sleep in your bedroom. So I went in her bedroom and she was in the living room because it had less dust. Next morning, she says to me, I dreamt your father. I said, yeah. You dreamt your father. And he was saying to me, I want that book. I want that book. She said, I don't know what book he's talking about. I said, Mom, it's Quran. She says, nah, it's the Bible. You know, so, our relationship with the people who have passed away and their relationship with us is intensified. And you can only know it when you get to a particular state where you can actually feel it, where you can actually experience it. And this rule of 40 is a very important one where you could employ to reach a level where you're able to perceive that reality. Give salawat to the Holy Prophet Muhammad and his family. Before I continue, before I forget, you know, a big disaster happened in Morocco recently. A big earthquake. Over 2,000 people have passed away. You know, we live in a time right now where there are a lot of signs, where all of the many of the falsehoods that people had were deceived under is now being exposed. We have a new desperate attempt to create even more profound falsehoods by appealing to our children and trying to indoctrinate our children, because it's no longer easy for them to fool people. So they want to indoctrinate your kids and take your kids away from you if you don't follow their program and so forth. It's just that desperate effort of the shaitan, because he knows his time is up. And so one of the signs of the last day would be things like earthquakes and floods and tremendous death all over the place and so forth and so on. And it is a mercy for us Muslims in the last days, when we die and we leave this awful world, brothers and sisters. Let me tell you, it's a mercy for them. You know, there are many hadith that say when people die under earthquakes and so on, what they die? They die the death of what? Shuhada. If you die the death of an illness of the stomach, for example, you die the death of a shaheed. This is a mercy for them. And so we want to help them go up higher. And so we want to send for them Surah Al-Fatiha. So I want to encourage you all to let us read from the sincerity of our heart, Surah Al-Fatiha for them. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin, Iyaka na'budu wa iyaka nasta'in. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين الحمد لله رب العالمين صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Okay, so I wanna end up by talking about the first ziyarat of that was done for Imam Hussein, which is a ziyarat of Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari, one of the last surviving companions of the Holy Prophet in the time of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the narrations comes from Atiyah al-Awfi, who was a companion of Jabir. And he says, I set out with Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari to visit the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And it says that when we reached Karbala, Jabir was blind at the time. Jabir went to the banks of the Euphrates and made ghusl and put on fresh clothes and a robe and opened a pouch and took out some perfume and applied it to his body. And he walked slowly, constantly mentioning the name of Allah until he came to the gravesite. And he said to me, Atiyah is saying, he said to me, guide me and make me touch it. Atiyah said that there's so many graves here, I don't know which one it is. Jabir said, I know the scent of Hussein, alayhi salam. Just bring some of the earth in turn from each of the graves and I will smell it and I will know who he is, which grave it is. And so Atiyah did this and he was brought to the grave. And when Jabir reached the grave, he said Jabir fainted from that spiritual power that comes to his grave that Jabir could perceive. And Atiyah said, I sprinkled some water on him and he regained consciousness. And he cried out 3 times, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. And he said, why does the beloved not respond to his beloved? Why is the man who I love not responding to the one who loves him? And then he said, but how will you respond? How can you respond when your jugular vein has been severed from your throat and your head severed from your body? How could you respond? Then he said, after sending blessings on him and his companions, he said, I swear by the one that sent Muhammad as prophet, sallallahu alaihi wa alihi, with the truth, we were together with you in everything that you did. And Atiyah said, oh Jabir, how could you say that? How could you say that we have been with them when we did not cross the valleys and mountains with them, nor did we take up arms? These people have had their heads severed from their bodies. Their children have become orphans, and their wives have been left widows. He said, oh Atiyah, I have heard my beloved, the messenger of God, say, Man ahabba qawman hushira ma'ahum, wa man ahabba amala qawman ushrika fi amalihim. He said, a person who loves a people will be resurrected with them. And a person who loves the action of a people share in their action. This is something for us, brothers and sisters. When we love Imam Hussein, alayhi salam, and we love his martyrdom, we share in that. We become part of that. And then it is said that somewhere along the line, they saw a group of people coming towards them. And Atiyah told him, this is the Ahlillbait, alayhim salam. And they came there with the heads, and they came there with their children and the women and so forth and so on. And they visited the grave of Imam Hussein and the companions that he had passed away with. And there was one grave that they couldn't find, and that was the grave of Ali Asghar. They wanted to know where Ali Asghar is buried. And I think Imam Zain al-Abidin said, we buried Ali Asghar on the chest of his father. But what chest does the father have after Yazid made them trample his chest with the horses? And Hazrat Zainab left them and she went to the grave of Hazrat Abbas. And we could only imagine what she told him, that we were waiting for you to come back, and you didn't come back to us. Oh, Abbas. And this, in a certain sense, encapsulates what the first ziyarat to Imam Hussein alayhi salam was. Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah wa al-wahi allati halat bifina'ik alayka minni salamullahi abadan ma baqit wa baqiya al-layl wa nahar. Assalamu ala al-Hussein wa ala Ali ibn al-Hussein wa ala awlad al-Hussein wa ala ashab al-Hussein salawat.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Sheikhna, thank you very much for such a wonderful lecture and for 3 beautiful nights with you. Thank you very much on behalf of everyone here. There is a beautiful hadith that says, "Man lam yashkur al-makhluq, lam yashkur al-khaliq." If you have not given thanks to the people who are created, you are not worthy of giving thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who created us. So it's very, very important to give thanks where due. On behalf of Second Gen, I'd like to thank the following people, and please, please, please forgive me if I have forgotten anyone. So, Brother Ahmed Sibaway, Faris Salman, Sadiq Ahmed, Hadi Kadham, Arid Shalal, Ulfa Saidi, Hassan Rida, Muhammad Sadiq Kadham, and Mustafa Diwani. Please recite aloud Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And from the wonderful volunteers here at Masjid Ahlillbait, I'd like to thank them one by one. And please do forgive me if I forget anyone. Hajia Athir, Hajia Wafa, Hajia Zainab. They're always working tirelessly behind the scenes. Sinan Shallal, Sayyid Salam Al Musawi, Haji Abu Yasir, Haji Abu Wafa, Haji Abu Sadiq, Haji Abu Haidar. Please thank them with a loud salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. So just 2 small reminders. We will have a Q&A session. We'll try to keep it brief with the responses as well, Sheikhna, if you don't mind. Also, if you would like to contribute towards the program from tonight or any other future programs, please do donate. You can do so at the back or by getting in touch with us. And for those of you who don't already follow us, you are able to just look around on your way out. There are a few images printed. You can just scan them, and that will allow you to follow us on Instagram and on Instagram and on WhatsApp. So please scan and follow. I won't take up much more of your time. I'm going to repost the link. So if you have any questions, please forward them. And above all else, please participate. So if you have a question, please let us know. Raise your hand, and we'll come with the mic. So Sheikhna, if you can welcome. Sallu ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
I have a brief question. Is can you advise us, all of us here, to, like, can you advise us on sports relating with religion? Like, do you know like some relations with sports and Islam? And what advice can you give us so